it was just good to see Celtic dishing out a beating on Naze's birthday.
We don't beat Slovan Bratislava at home, don't deserve to be there, quite frankly.
You don't feel that electricity anywhere else apart from Celtic Park on Champions League nights. Celtic maintained their 100% record in the league with a couple of goals from the new boys, and the Champions League is on the horizon. That's this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. Stephen, Melly,
Yes.
How's it
is
going?
Champions League Eve. Are we excited? Do we feel it?
I'm not getting Champions League just
No.
yet. No, I think it'll
Once
literally
that
be.
music starts.
Yeah, I think that's definitely it. I think it's quite a strange approach to it because normally I think we've started off the campaign with some biggies in recent years, but we've got I hate to say it, winnable game. I hate to sort of clip myself there, but we have got a game where you think to yourself, we better be winning this. So it's quite exciting, but I'm not getting that old tingle, not getting the Champions League feeling yet, just until I get there.
I'm looking forward to it. I think with this new format and all that, it's something a bit different compared to what we're usually used to. And like, you hate to sort of take it for granted being in the Champions League, but we have been in it 3 seasons in a row now, and with this going into it, it's the kind of first time in a while that we're going into it where Celtic look good. They've got a decent squad on paper and they've got a decent draw as well, so it should all go well. Famous last words.
Champions League, that means scouting podcasts, that means At The Match podcast, that means match reaction podcasts. All of that is available on patreon.com/20minutetims, where you can support the podcast, get the podcast ad-free, get extra videos, podcasts, writing. If you're not on it, you're missing out. Patreon.com/20minutetim. The link in every bio that you're watching and listening to this. That's the pitch over. Melly, before we get to the Champions League stuff, though, it was quite nice. It's always nice to beat Hearts. It's always nice to beat wee torn-faced Stevie Naismith and his crappy wee hoodie that he wears by the side of the pitch. And he liked to have a wee moan after every time Stephen Naismith's Hearts players, he always has a wee grumble about something. This time it was his absurd comments about the refereeing decision, saying, well, if one's a penalty, the other one has to be a penalty. Not how it works.
No.
It's not really how it works. But I didn't think, turn our attention to Celtic first, I didn't think Celtic were vintage at their best.
No, I don't think they were. Well, what we've come to expect this season, Celtic have been fairly decent in every match. The first couple of games we sort of tailored off after 60 minutes when we put that down to the...
Did you catch that? Spoiler for later in the episode, you said tailored off.
Oh, did I? Not tapered off. I think it was just that with the subs coming on, they weren't as good as the players going off, but we seem to have sorted that now. And I think in this game, I think it was just one of those post-international breaks, pre-Champions League games where it's one of those, get it out the way. Hearts sat in with a 5-3-2 and just sort of try to contain Celtic, and it wasn't for a great spectacle, but we came away with the victory.
I think we came up against a slightly desperate team because of how they've been playing. Obviously, that now makes it 6 straight defeats, I think, or 5 in the league.
They're
anyway.
rooted to the bottom of the table at the moment.
Very unusual position for Hearts to be in.
Funny position.
Yeah, a very funny position for Hearts to be in. But I mean, they were easily the third best team in the country last year. Now they've gone to bottom of the league. So I could sense the kind of desperation, them turning up thinking we need to get something from this game, or the pressure's really going to start to be on. Normally, you assume that these teams turn up to Celtic Park and they just sort of try and contain and think we're not going to be judged on points from this stadium, from the stadium of the champions and all that, but there will reach a time where you have to try and claw something out of it, and I felt that's what Hearts tried to do. They tried to frustrate, so I think that Celtic came up against that on a, as Melly said, kind of less than ideal preparation for it. There are a lot of players away and probably not that many of them training together all week, so I don't think it was a bad performance by any means. I think it was just the maybe most disjointed performance of the season so far, but it could have been better because I think there was some wasteful finishing in there. I think there was just a little bit of disconnect between the creative players and the final ball. There was a lot of kind of balls that were either being overhit or they were hit off shins. It seemed like the players were lining up to just play a ball through and it would come off someone's shin or something. There was just quite a lot of that. So a frustrating performance at times. Overall, it didn't really matter because Celtic won't be stopped just yet.
Well, I think it was quite interesting from a point of view that Celtic have kind of had it all their own way in the league so far. When teams come to Celtic Park like that, we normally score an early or early-ish goal and it sets their game plan in the mud, or even when we go and play away, the early goal absolutely kills the momentum for the other teams and kills their game plan. But it was interesting to see how Celtic had to sort of try and solve their own problem because we didn't get that early goal.
No, we didn't. Celtic were okay, but as Stephen said, it did feel a bit disjointed. Players you wouldn't expect to be making simple passes just weren't doing that, and it just felt like a team that hadn't trained all week. Because what we've come to expect from Celtic is a standard that they've set this season, whereas last season we were sort of waiting for Celtic to turn up or do something around this time, and we were getting the odd result and then we're having a poor result. But Celtic have set the standard this season and they didn't meet their own standards, but that's going to happen at points in this season. And last season that would have been drop points. This season it's a victory with a clean sheet. So it never ever felt like it was one of those games where you're going to get to the very end and Celtic are going to be throwing things at Hearts. It kind of felt like if Celtic get a goal, didn't really see Hearts scoring last season. There was plenty of games where Celtic would get a goal and then it's coming for the other team. They'll get a chance and they'll score and then Celtic could be in trouble. I didn't quite get the feeling of that from this game.
Sorry, this period of time didn't exist last season because I watched the Inside the Huddle or Behind the Huddle documentary, and in the first 10 minutes it goes from Brendan Rodgers arriving to November.
Cover the Rangers game and then off it goes.
It's really, really good, but you're just like, wait a minute, there's been a few wee things, there's been a few wee bits and bobs edited out here. You're talking about, you know, the way Celtic have been performing this season, and a lot of that is when we sat down to discuss what was going to make the agenda for this podcast, Melly came up with, Stephen, the case for the defence, and I think we need to talk about how good the back four, back five have been. Greg Taylor, I thought he was brilliant against Hearts again. I thought Greg Taylor's been really good all season. Liam Scales, I'm not even going to patronise him anymore. Heroic. Some of the defending in the Hearts game, he was great against Rangers as well. Cameron Carter-Vickers he coasts through these games. AJ's in the form of his life. Talk of a new contract, much warranted. And then we've got our husky little goalkeeper at the back there, who's very agile.
Yeah, throwing himself about. I thought that save in the first half was a little bit for the cameras. That was a little bit, watch this, Dad.
See if it was for the cameras, but I think he'd have palmed it away. The fact that he managed to hold on to it, I was like, that's very aesthetically pleasing, that one, because you don't see that much these days.
He had two of them written up, but you could tell that Shankland was just shooting whenever he got the ball. I can't be bothered making a run into the box. I'm just going to shoot from here. So there's a couple of attempts like that, but he's had a couple of saves against Rangers, right enough, but that one that was quite late on, very close in, that was a brilliant save from Kasper Schmeichel. But for the rest of the time, the defence limited Hearts to virtually nothing, to be honest. A couple of breakaways where you thought, I agree with you, Mel, I never really thought that Celtic were under a huge amount of pressure, really in a lot of danger. But when it was still 1-0, it kind of felt like one of those games that can surprise you, where just one cross or one daft corner, one switch off moment, and we could kind of come a cropper here. That save from Schmeichel was brilliant and crucial at the time, but there was never that huge amount of pressure, and a big part of that was that Cameron Carter-Vickers and Liam Scales are just mopping things up on the halfway line, which allowed Celtic to basically live in the Hearts half for the most part of the game. I know that didn't necessarily translate to overwhelming gilt-edged chances being created, but the territorial advantage was enormous for Celtic, and it was because anything that came anywhere near them, Cameron Carter-Vickers and Liam Scales were just dealing it straight away. Greg Taylor, that you mentioned as well, watch him and how often he picks up loose balls around the opposition box. The amount of recoveries, which is really just kind of a stats word for how many times he picks up possession, either gains possession or regains it when the ball is loose or stops the opposition's possession of the ball. He did it 9 times against Hearts. That was rivalled only by Rio Hatate, but it was more than Cal McGregor. It was more than the rest of the defence. And see, when you watch it back, the amount of times that Hearts look to break away and Greg Taylor just nips in there, steals the possession, and that's Celtic on the attack again. So when you talk about, and Brendan Rodgers talks about the press and the pressure that they're putting on opposition, that is allowed to happen by guys like that who are constantly just mopping up possession and keeping the ball for Celtic.
Well, we've seen that with Kyogo's goal against Rangers, didn't he? Greg Taylor gets in ahead of Czerny, doesn't he? Passes to Kyogo and then he's through. And I think Greg Taylor's been great again. I think he's sort of, I don't know.
What do you make of this contract situation with Greg Taylor? Because I think, I mean, we've been on the Greg Taylor bandwagon for a wee while, saying that he deserves a new contract, and I think by now I'm kind of getting the impression that if Greg Taylor's going to sign a new contract, he probably would have already signed one by now. Brendan Rodgers is waxing lyrical about Greg
Very
Taylor.
effusive with his praise recently.
Very good word. Two press conferences back to back. I mean, the
Can you
Greg
tell
Taylor.
I'm reading these?
Aye, have you got me notepad down there? Big words.
Thesaurus.
He's been praising Greg Taylor to help, but you think this contract chat's been bumbling about for ages, and I'm now starting to wonder, Melly, if Greg Taylor's thought, well, do you know what? I've done the Celtic thing, I've done the Scotland thing, I've won more than I ever thought I'd win. Maybe I wonder if it's Greg Taylor's side that's holding things up, because I'd hate to think Celtic are sort of offering Greg Taylor a contract any less than really what he deserves, because he's a mainstay in
Senior player,
He's a
isn't he?
senior player. He's a mainstay in the team. He really broke through in Angie's thing, as we've discussed at length. Those last couple of seasons have been brilliant from Greg Taylor. And when you watch the documentary that I watched, Inside the Huddle or Behind the Huddle, I can't remember what it's called now, but he's a big voice in the changing room as well. He's one of the guys always talking, and there with Callum McGregor and Joe Hart from last season. So he's a senior, established player, and the manager loves him. The fans have really bought into Greg Taylor now. So I do wonder if maybe it's a Greg Taylor thing. Maybe he just fancies his luck elsewhere.
Possibly, because I think when you look at him, he's sort of in that top hierarchy of Celtic players, isn't it? He's a homegrown player, but he's also very vocal, and he shows those leadership skills. The Inside the Huddle sort of focused on about 4 or 5 players, and he's one of them. And what you see from him, like I've seen Celtic train, lucky enough to see that, and he's very, very vocal. He doesn't accept the standards dropping. So from Celtic's point of view, it would be silly to not give him a contract, and you can just, if you want, you can just go to bad Celtic straight away and go, oh, they're not offering them the right deal. But I don't think Greg Taylor would be difficult to deal with. Celtic have already given him an extension a couple of years ago under Ange. Ange Postecoglou raved about him. Brendan Rodgers has raved about him. So you would think the ball's in Celtic's court to offer him the deal, and it should be pretty simple to do. But if it's getting to this point now where Celtic are no strangers to dishing out 5-year deals, absolutely no strangers to it. So if they were to offer Greg Taylor a 5-year deal tomorrow, I don't think they would begrudge that. But for even a contract not to be there, you kind of look at it going, but they're looking at the right back who's still got years to go in his deal. You have Cameron Carter-Vickers, Matt O'Reilly, Cal McGregor, Dyson Kyogo all signed contracts last season. So you'd think it would be high up in the priority list.
Which is the reason I'm sort of thinking it's maybe, I mean,
it looks more likely it's Greg Taylor's
side.
It
was the reason I'm thinking it's maybe Greg Taylor's went like, do you know what? I quite fancy seeing what options
completed
are.
It, mate.
He has.
Yeah, Brendan Rodgers called it a priority, didn't he? I think he said it was very high up the priority list. And I think, Jimmy, you asked him about Greg Taylor, or you
asked him about the left backs, and he chose to answer about Greg Taylor,
right.
which I thought was interesting.
You spoke to him at a press conference that was just after Baye had come in, and he started talking about Greg Taylor. He loves him as a player, how he's grown in the team and all that. Brendan Rodgers spoke about having watched them outside of the club, and now that he's in the club, he sees Greg Taylor growing as a player all the time. So it's clear to me that the Celtic and Brendan Rodgers want him to stay, but the hold up, once you've kind of eliminated those things, it must be Greg Taylor who's not necessarily turning it down, but taking his time about it, because I think this will be, he's been at Celtic 5 seasons now, this is 5th season, which would make it probably 8-9 seasons in Scottish football entirely.
Since the Kelly years?
Yeah, so it was at Kelly for at least 2 or 3 seasons before Celtic as well. So I think it'll be 27 soon. So it might just be that it could just fancy another challenge, which is absolutely fine. I think that if he sees off yet another left back challenge, I don't know, Baye's only in the door, so that remains to be seen. But if he sees off another left back challenge and retains his place, hopefully scooshes another league this year, hopefully, fingers crossed, plays at least, even if they share out the minutes here and there, he'll play at least 4 or 5 games in the Champions League again. If we get to the end of this season, Celtic have had another brilliant, successful one.
He needs to stay for the 10.
Yeah.
Sign that 5-year deal and stay for the 10.
Rats. Imagine trading immortality for mediocrity. He has to stay here for his 12th season at Celtic, or he's a rat.
I know we signed Baye on loan from Barcelona, but look, people accuse me of having like a sort of Greg Taylor love in about, but being absolutely honest about it, it's the way that Greg Taylor plays, how vocal he is, how much of a leader he is, how well he understands the system he's playing in. For Baye to come in and take Greg Taylor's place, he'd have to be a really pretty good footballer. He'd have to be really, really, really accomplished, a quick learner, and also a leader, because Greg Taylor sort of offers so much, and it looks very, very difficult to dislodge him.
It does. It's look, there's going to be games where he can come in. We've got Falkirk next week in the Cup. You'd think that would be an opportunity, but they're playing well as well in the Championship. So I think Celtic want to keep that sort of continuity. But with Greg Taylor, from everything you see at Celtic, where it comes out in the wee 1 minute clips of the training you get, or the inside the huddle.
You're impressed, are you?
Inside the huddle, that you just see he's one of these guys. And when you hear clips coming out about Celtic where Cal McGregor's constantly talking about setting the standards, it's guys like Cal McGregor, Greg Taylor, James Forrest, sort of Tony Ralston, sort of homegrown guys, but these are the guys that are going to be at Celtic long term, whereas guys like Matt O'Reilly come in, do well and head off. These are the guys that continually set the standards at Celtic, and we need to keep guys like that around, because if you don't, James Forrest might not be at Celtic long if we lose Greg Taylor, Cal McGregor's in his 30s now. You're sort of looking, going, where's the new guys that are going to do this? Maybe Luke McCowan or that, but you're looking about going, Greg Taylor's perfect for Celtic right now. And if Bai does come in, it's because he's a better player. That's fine. That's how football works. And Greg Taylor, I still think there'll be plenty of football for him. So hopefully they get him tied down, because I think he's a really good
The
player.
one stick people beat Greg Taylor with is that he gets found out at the Champions League, which admittedly I think is bordering a bit on comical now, because Celtic have got and have had so many players who get found out at the Champions League. It's not Greg Taylor's fault.
Well, AJ struggled last season as well in the Champions League. I wouldn't accuse him of not being good enough.
Yeah, and a lot of the time it's just guys who are taller and faster and stronger than him, and he struggles against these pure athletes because he's 5'7", I don't know where he's from, but he does struggle with the physicality, or as we've seen in many games, even against Hearts and Rangers, people just shelling balls on top of him, and the guy up there winning headers against him. It's when he says
He's
found,
decent in the air as well.
I think when people say found out at the Champions League, it paints an image of someone who's absolutely horrible, who's terrible at this level. But I don't really think that's the case either.
No, and I think even in Celtic TV commentary, when I watched the game back, they'd remarked on this thing about how he's targeted. But so what? So because Rangers managed to boot the ball out for a throw-in over Greg Taylor's head, that makes him a bad player? I can't make that connection, to be honest. They can target that all they want. They never get anything out of it. But I don't really understand that angle. The reason we're talking about Greg Taylor so much this week is because he was very good at the weekend, and that leads me on to the point about how it might not be a case of, he's one of these positions that Celtic probably have several of, where it's not just a case of, right, he's a left back, get another left back in, he's better, put him in. Everyone who has spoken about Greg Taylor, including Brendan Rodgers and Ange Postecoglou, speaks about how useful he is when it comes to tactical discipline, when it comes to implementing their style. He's a main factor of it. He has kept his place all this time because Ange Postecoglou came in, tried something completely different with the fullbacks. He adapted to it almost straight away and kept his place. Brendan Rodgers implements something else. He adapts to it straight away and keeps his place. So it's not just a case of plug in, plug out positions. Sometimes with Celtic, especially when a manager has an idea of how he wants to play, if a guy has that, and he can trust him to basically carry out his instructions. And as I've already detailed, the amount of times he wins the ball far up the pitch that allows Celtic to attack, that's very, very important. It's not just a case of, right, we'll get a taller left back in, that'll solve all our problems, because that might fix one problem, right? Rangers will no longer punt balls and down that line. Who knows where they'll punt them after that. But we'll lose a lot going forward with Greg Taylor. So
look at Rangers are full of tall guys, aren't they? They have been for the past 2 seasons. They've barely beat Celtic at all unless it's a meaningless game. So, and I think alongside Greg Taylor, I think, like you were saying, the whole defence has been great this season, innit? AJ's been brilliant. That was probably his least good game against Hearts, a wee bit loose. But when you've got Carter Vickers and Scales mopping up, but Hearts again, very forward thinking, like direct balls, and that's what our 2 centre halves are best at, heading away balls. And Celtic just picked up the loose balls, and like you're saying, just guys springing attacks on them constantly. So having that, and then having the extra wee bit behind him with Kasper Schmeichel, where he can get the ball and launch attacks straight away as well, it's really up Celtic's game this season.
As we work our way across the defence, every time we've signed a left back, up until very recently, the chat has been, that's Greg Taylor bombed it. Time's up, Greg. You know, you got it for long enough. Now we've got a left back, and then the left back sort of doesn't really usurp Greg Taylor. Do you think we're going to have a very similar thing with Trusty coming in and Liam Scales? Do you think he's going to keep his place longer? Do you think it's an automatic switch out?
Well, it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like Trusty is trusted to go straight into the team. Well, that doesn't really matter just now because it'll take time to adapt to the new surroundings, the new team. Liam Scales has that advantage because he's been here longer. He's been here for ages now, to be honest. He's one of the, if not necessarily senior players, but he's been here. He was one of Ange's first signings, wasn't he? Well, whether it was Ange that pulled the trigger on the deal, it doesn't really matter. He's been
Ange's been a fan of Liam Scales for a long time.
His dream signing. Just like, what was it?
I'm not coming unless you sign this guy from, would we get him Shamrock Rovers or something?
Wim Janssen came in and immediately signed Darren Jackson. I've waited for this moment my entire career. No, but he has been here a long time, so he is used to what the standards are expected of him at Celtic. But not only that, he's been excellent recently. Liam Scales has really been excellent, and I don't see any reason to upset that just now. Selfishly, I'd like to see Trusty. I'd like to see all the new signings at least given a run out so we can make some sort of judgment on them as players, because we haven't seen either VARIO or Trusty or I think that's it. I think those are or Sinisalo, but that's not that important. Yeah. But I don't really see him being taken out of this team anytime soon. I'm just glad we've got a squad now. I'm just glad we've got the options, and we are sitting here talking about how we're going to get this £6 million signing into the team. This guy in front of him so good. How are we going to get this Barcelona left back into the team? This wee guy for Kilmarnock's been so good. It's a good headache to have.
I was talking in the Discord and I was saying, look, in the Hearts game.
The Discord?
Oh yeah, so patreon.com/20minute-tims. If you join the all-in tier, you can join our Discord, which is on fire, particularly on match days. It's the best Celtic community out there. You need to get yourself involved in it. Thank you, Melly.
No problem.
I was talking in Discord.
What a pro.
I know. I was talking in Discord about, I says, listen, Hearts, Liam Scales was excellent today.
Yeah.
You know, he was absolutely excellent. He copped a boot right in the chops
Yeah.
at one point and just shrugged it like a big dog. He just went, and then he got himself back in the game, right? And I just thought, this guy's just blood and snotters and commitment and bravery and a lot of things a lot of people want from a centre half. And the sort of feedback came, yeah, well, he still pish on the ball. And I thought to myself, but is that getting a bit unfair? Because if I was to say what better could Liam Scales do apart from becoming an entirely different footballer, I think by now, after seeing Liam Scales for a year, we know he's not the best on the ball. That's really never going to he's not going to get better passing technique. No. But in terms of defending, in terms of he's not doing anywhere near as much rash challenges. He's not getting that thing where he heads the ball he wins a header, but he heads it into danger. He's not getting turned the wrong way and he's left sprinting back to goal, or as frequently trying to reclaim a situation. These things don't seem to be happening as much this season.
No, he's really grown into being a Celtic player. I was a critic of him, and I'll happily admit that. But I think when you get to the higher level, you maybe see more. But right now, it's Liam Scales' jersey. It's not even his to lose. He's earned his jersey, hasn't he? And I think circumstances with Trusty coming in late, you don't then bring in a guy a day before a derby game, put him in, and then if you lose the derby, you go, well, why did you take out a guy that's not conceded a goal? And then with Trusty not getting back till Thursday or something, it didn't make sense to change it before the Hearts game into the Bratislava game. I think it's the Champions League one. If it was a Dortmund away we had up first, we maybe would have made some changes to get players in. But I think Celtic are in such a good place. Part of being in that good place is Liam Scales and Cameron Carter-Vickers' partnership at the back. He's been really good. I still have questions over his passing, but right now with Hearts, I didn't worry about him. And Bratislava, it's that one game in the Champions League. You think, do you know what? He deserves to keep his place for that. And if time will tell whether Trusty comes in, he probably will, because Celtic have earmarked that position to try and improve. Brilliant. But as we've seen from bringing in Baye, as we've seen from bringing in Trusty, the levels of the guys that they're going to take their places has risen. And that's what you want. I always say it, competition kills complacency. Sinisalo's there. We've got 2 players for each position now. It's the way it should be for a team with loads of money.
Yeah. In Scales' case, you can really see where experience becomes very, very valuable to a player. Now, he's a guy he's not young. He's the same age as Cameron Carter-Vickers, give or take. I think there's only about 6 months in it between them, but obviously Cameron Carter-Vickers is a much more accomplished player and has come from a completely different level to get to Celtic than Scales has, but they've met here and they actually complement each other quite well. But playing alongside Cameron Carter-Vickers, what we've always said is that he tends to make every defender he is paired with better. But Scales has taken to that really well and has learned a lot, because some of the misgivings I had about him previously were that he was not rash, because that makes him sound like he's like a headless chicken or like violent or something like that.
There was a panic about him, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah, that's a far better word, because what he was, he had a tendency in his first season to try and win absolutely everything first time. So he'd get himself ahead of the attacker and try and get himself in front. And sometimes he'd be rolled, and that's when we'd end up kind of facing the wrong way, would face our own goals with a chase, as you've just described there. That seems to be completely gone now. He's much better in the air. He's much better. His timing, that's the main thing about it. His timing and his decision making is so much better than it was when he first emerged into the team as, let's face it, a pure emergency. That when he get pitched in at Ibrox, was it? We thought, how can we possibly win this game with Scales and Lagerbielke at centre half? And win we did.
AJ, look, Mel, I thought you were quite soft on AJ. I thought AJ was pretty honking, to be honest, against Hearts. Some of the forward play I thought was misplaced passes and terrible touches. No, it's probably a game to forget for him, but I think overall that doesn't really diminish how brilliant a signing he's been, and he's been absolutely integral. He's a right-sided powerhouse.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and I think he's sort of when that final third of the season, when we got him and Greg Taylor back into the team, that's when you've seen the best of Celtic, when we had those two guys in complementing the midfield. And I think it's quietly going under the radar how many goal assists the two of them have. I think if it was another team in the same city, probably would be hearing all about numbers and numbers, but these two are quietly going about it, assisting goals, getting into great positions. And if our strikers were on fire, maybe we'd have a few more. So Greg Taylor did another assist for Ida there at the weekend. So I think the two of them have been great. AJ really just, it's not even quiet anymore how good he's been. You're really taking notice of him, so much so that at the weekend when he drops off a bit, you're like, what's up with you? And then but we have to remember he went off for Canada 20 odd minutes in with a slight hamstring thing. So I think in an ideal world, if Celtic had been a couple of goals up, they'd have brought on Ralston for him, but just the way the match panned out, it wasn't possible. But he's been great recently, and I think he's just so consistent that maybe we are kind of getting into that Kieran Tierney, Cameron Carter-Vickers, McGregor thing, we sort of forget to mention him sometimes just because he is so good. But I think his numbers now are just making you take notice.
It's funny that sometimes some players only ever come up on podcasts when they've been uncharacteristically just off it, like their normal standards.
Remember when we first started the podcast all those years ago, Callum McGregor used to suffer for the same thing.
Yeah.
He used to actually make us go, hold on a minute, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, Callum McGregor's been excellent this week.
So Johnston has come up on a week where he hasn't been up to his usual standards. It was just, he wasn't the only one, as we spoke about earlier on. It was an uncharacteristic day of slack passes. The passing wasn't good really across the board for Celtic and for our own standards, and that's what Brendan Rodgers doesn't really want to see in a Celtic team. There's a couple of quite wasteful opportunities going forward where he passed it inside the pitch and Hearts managed to break, but again, it snuffed out immediately, so it doesn't really matter all that much. We're trying things and it's not really coming off. Even at the edge of the box, you had to Hatate and Engels trying to play wee intricate 1-2s that weren't necessarily working. So it was just a day where not everything really clicked, but one day it really will against one of these teams.
What did you make of Engels?
I thought he was decent. I was still trying to figure out how he fits in, but I think he is a good player. He's one of those guys where sometimes you can tell by just his first touch that he's a good player because he's just got that technique. He's not a guy that has to take a touch, look at it and see what he's doing. His first touch always kills it dead, and I think that's the most important mark of a really good player. He seems to be quite forward thinking, which I wasn't sure if he would be, but also he likes doing the hard graft in there, and he likes just by going it. We spoke about it the weekend, Stephen, in the match. There was a point where he was just about to go off, and I think he seen that McCowan was over there, and he knew his number was up, and he takes a touch that the ball goes out of play, and he was very harsh on himself. So I think he's a bit of perfectionist, which is great, and I think he's got that physicality about him. He's not scared to get. I think he did a lovely wee professional foul on Hearts as well, and
he got a few chops in the game.
He did. He was the most foul player in the game.
Was he?
Yeah. He sort of a lot of the midfielders you're looking for nowadays aren't those guys that are just passers of the ball. It's guys that carry the ball. Everybody looks for that now, and I think he's one of those guys. So I think he's going to be a decent player for Celtic, and maybe over time he'll just settle into it. And I think it will just be one of those guys where you don't really mention his price tag because you go, he's worth that.
Yeah, very good, to be honest. Well, it was good. It was good in the game. I wouldn't go too far beyond that because gave the ball away a couple of times, but as we've just been talking about, a lot of players were guilty of that on the day. It was just one of those games for Celtic, but what struck me about Engels was it kind of reminded me of Bernardo in that way. Not necessarily that he's exactly the same type of player, but when Bernardo first came into the team, I thought, right, competence. Right, he's a guy who's a very good all-rounder, and maybe outstanding attributes will emerge as he develops and as he sort of breaks into the team, as he settles in. Because as it stands, all he really looks to me as a good all-rounder, a very good midfield player. And I'm not really identifying anything that's out of the ordinary just yet. It just looks very, very
Were you
good at
surprised
everything.
the swap was for Bernardo? Because when we signed him a couple of weeks ago, we were discussing for the midfield three who might come out, and we'd sort of thought, well, actually, it might actually end up being Hatate there, but
Yeah.
it looks like it might be the Bernardo swap out.
Early days, we might see various combinations of all three. We might see McCown start games as well. I think he deserves to at least be sort of in the conversation for it. I don't know just yet. That was obviously he's come on as a sub for Bernardo, I think it was, and then it was vice versa in this game. So possibly Hatate looks to keep his place because he's capable of so much. Hatate, not a great game for him again, but we'll sort of write it off and move on for certain players. But with Engels, what I've noticed as well, that it's a conversation we've had a number of times based on something that Brendan Rodgers said a long time ago now. He spoke about power in the team. And I look at him and I think, right, we've had several players over the last couple of years, more maybe, where they've probably been very good players. They've probably shown up very well in certain metrics. But as soon as they arrive in Scottish football, the physicality of it just swallows them up. Home is one of them. So he's lost his place in the squad altogether. Home was one. Kobayashi, probably a very good footballer, but the physicality just completely swallowed him up in Scotland. I look at Engels and I think, well, there's no chance of that happening. He's already completely taken to it. Coming from Germany is obviously a fairly easy transition from Germany to Scotland. He's not going to be phased. He's not going to be overawed by anything he sees in Scotland, given the level of opposition over there. But I see him, and he's already very physically capable. A couple of sort of professional fouls. There was one where he ripped the shirt off someone against Rangers as well. Took one for the team. Took a booking. So he looks very, very capable in all these departments. And it's once again we're eventually starting to address the things that Brendan Rodgers has been talking about since essentially day one.
Yeah.
More power in the team, more pace, more this, and we're finally 3 windows in or whatever it is. We're starting to put that piece together.
Big pressure, said Lawrence Shankland. You know what's pressure, Lawrence Shankland? Not falling off an absolute cliff. The Lawrence Shankland fall off needs to be studied. He was, Celtic should sign him, Rangers should sign him. Has he scored yet this season? No, I don't think he's scored in the league. The guy is, like his whole entire team, has fallen off massively. Man of the match performance from Engels, slotted his penalty away past Craig Gordon, who I just feel... I've never really taken to Craig Gordon. I don't think many people have.
No.
And it got my man of the match performance. I wasn't so sure about that. Melly, what did you make of Shankland's wee comments?
It's just one of these things you try, isn't it? He kind of
£10 million, no chance, as somebody else said.
That was someone else, yeah.
You should have seen as soon as they scored, they should have went, it was 11 actually.
It was Shankland, another unfortunate game for him, which was good. He had a couple of pot shots, but he never looked like trouble in Celtic. And as well, it's that, mate, when he gets subbed off and he just decided to go to the closest bit and he had to walk all the way around taking dog's abuse. Funny.
It took it quite well, in fairness to him. He gave a wee thumbs up.
Aye, so I love to give him credit, but it's just...
It actually literally stuck in your throat there. Then, yeah, there was a wee pause for a moment.
I know, because I heard Celtic were in for him at one point. I was like, please no. But I think we all sort of seen it with him that, look, this is a purple patch for the guy.
Yeah.
Did well last season. I didn't see it lasting for him. And I think with Hearts as well, you're looking at them going, all the good players that I'd maybe look at and say, do you know what, he's a good player or that's a bit of quality. They kept them on the bench and tried to bring them on in the
like
second
Jan
half.
Dander and Blair Spittle.
Yeah, two guys, and Spittle was the one that had that decent sort of cross in. So all the sort of flair players were kept on the bench, and if that's what Hearts were going to do, that's fine, because Celtic this season will break them down and they'll not get away with it. It was just good to see Celtic dishing out a beating on Nazy's birthday.
Did you think?
In England at the weekend, Nottingham Forest won at Anfield, doing exactly that. So they kept some of their kind of more attacking players on the bench in order to sort of unleash them on Liverpool after they'd kind of tired them out. I think that's what Nazy was.
Absolutely not. I just think he's scrambling, he's panicking, he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just throwing things. I heard somebody criticise him. It might be Michael Stewart saying, "Look, one week you're praising Yandan and Blair Spittle, the next week you're not playing them. We can't make head nor tail of this situation, and he looks to me like a man in deep panic for his job, and rightly so. He was waffling some amount of nonsense about the penalties. We've discussed the penalty. I think the calls are right. I think especially after Willie Collum was out midweek talking us through all the VAR mistakes that they've made in the past. One that was particularly highlighted was Stephen, who's the big guy with the bags, the place for
Barron, yeah.
One, a Connor Barron handball. He's like six, he's a half a yard away from the ball, whatever, and it hits his hand, and Willie Collum points out, the reason this wasn't given was because he was so close and there was nothing he could do. When I saw the Scales incident, I thought that was the same. The Scales is so close to the ball, they're so close to the guy striking the ball, there's no way they can award this. As it transpired, it hit his shoulder anyway.
Yeah.
And then I thought the Hearts one was fair enough. I thought that was pretty much a bang-on penalty call for a handball. Naismith, confusingly, said if you give one penalty, then you have to give the other. And fair play, I think it might have been Jane Lewis pressed him and went, did you see the incidents? He goes, well, I watched them in the iPad. She goes,
Good girl.
Yeah, she goes, have you watched them? Have you watched them back? Then he goes, well, I've seen enough to make my mind up. I'm like, okay, so the answer's no. Stephen Naismith, you've no watched them back.
Yeah, Stephen, for you that benefited from a disgraceful penalty decision last year on Iwata to come out and go.
Aye.
Yeah. So I think it evens itself out of the course of a year, Stephen. But a ridiculous from him again. I think with the first one, it's bobbling about, but we've seen this over the sort of ironed this out that these aren't penalties anymore. Sometimes the ball will hit a hand in the box and it's not. This one didn't even hit the hand, it was sort of up at the shoulder level.
Some of the replays did look like it though. In fairness to anyone who thought that was a penalty but didn't really kind of look at it properly, Scales' hand was...
Stephen Naismith?
Yeah, well, Stephen Naismith. His hand was about there. And from the angle, it looks as if it hits it because the shot's kind of miles away. But when you do see it from, I think it's the angle behind the goal, even though it's slightly obscured by the crossbar, you see that it goes past his hand. You see, and even the stills of it as well. You can easily kind of draw a straight line from Shanklin's head to the shoulder, and it's past his hand. So I do sympathise with anyone who saw the replays and thought they were a bit sketchy because it did look like his arm was raised and it did hit it. But it's one of those ones where even on my way home from the game, they were already talking on the radio, Sports Sound or whatever it was, about how, well, you can't give a penalty for that because it's not hit a part of the hand that is eligible to give a penalty. So it's a non-conversation.
Open and shut case, as far as I'm concerned.
It's great, isn't it, when you're having to get home from the game to find out what you've seen at
I
the
didn't
game.
have a clue.
It's just so poor that people watching the game at home will have a better idea of what's going on. Again, can we not just have a wee thing up saying, look, no handball or anything?
Yeah.
Please tell us what's going on at the game. But the second penalty, well, the actual penalty that was given away, apart from Michael Smith, again for Hearts, who Celtic didn't get a penalty against, he was the most guilty man I've ever seen for a penalty. Hits both hands out and then brings them in and pretends he's hurt his hand or something. So Stonewall penalty, it stops the ball getting crossed in. The distance is massive as well. So, and it was just good to see Engels step up and go, I remember last season we couldn't even score penalties. Now we've got a guy stepping up and slotting them away as if it's nothing.
And the SFA had their own version of Super VARIO World last week, Steve. What did you make of the VAR review? I saw a lot of fair play to Willie Collum for coming out and addressing this, and I thought, but that much? Do you know what I mean? You get no credit really for being.
Oh, come on!
Crap
in recent years, we've had nothing, and we're getting this. So miles off what we want it to be, but it is a step forward.
It is something, but I know what you mean about the credit though, because what's the alternative? Come out and lie to us about how these are all right.
But that's what they usually do.
True.
I think what happened, what my problem is immediately by doing it, right? So there's two events. Willie Collum comes out and says, let's talk about mistakes, and then there's the mistakes. But everyone just focused so much on Willie Collum talking about the mistakes that they forgot they forgot to actually speak about how bad some of the decisions were. It's like, I don't know, going to your boss and going, see, before we start, I've been dipping the till for 6 months. He goes, thanks for telling me. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, right. So let's talk about the mistakes a wee bit. So I don't know if it's going to be an ongoing thing. I don't know if we're going to get it every week, but I just thought some of the calls were, as us fans in the stand, they were pretty horrendous. And
some of the footage as well, that one where it appears like the referee is advising players not to tackle in certain areas. And
I
all
was
that.
I was all right on that because
Yeah.
the referee's caught. I'm willing to accept the referee's caught up in the moment, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm not willing to accept is the Kilmarnock one. Remember the Celtic penalty where Kyogo's wiped
yeah.
out, right? The referee immediately goes, "Not for me, not for me." That's the ref's
Made
mic.
himself big.
Yeah, made himself big, right? And then in the VAR room, they're talking about it, and they came to the wrong conclusion anyway. But Willie Collum comes out and goes, the referee couldn't see the incident because he'd positioned himself and he was off guard by the chip over the wall. And I'm like, well, if he didn't see the incident, why is he immediately making the decision not to award Celtic the penalty? And my final observation on the VAR review is, of the decisions made against Celtic, they were to prevent a Celtic advantage. Of the decisions, wrong decisions for Rangers, they were to prevent the opposition getting an advantage. Now, I'm not saying there's any that goes beyond, but the SFA, aye, the SFA put these two things up. So for the two, it was to prevent Celtic getting an advantage in the game, and it was wrong. And then the other ones against Rangers, it was to prevent the opposition getting an advantage, and that was wrong as well. The Tom Lawrence tackle that you're talking about,
Yeah.
massive touch on the ball, and then VAR turns it over because he'd wiped the guy out. It's absurd.
I know. The stuff about the VAR in the Kyogo penalty thing. I remember that game. I remember being at that game and immediately saying after that, I'm going to need that explained to me because it looks to me from the halfway line, it looks to me like Kyogo has taken a lovely touch and just been cleaned straight out, and that apparently is exactly what happened. But the discourse there was that no, he's made himself big and he's not moving. How on earth did they come? I mean, the clip is right there in front of us. He's just made himself big. It's yet another one of these things. I'm always talking about this in our Discord that we mentioned earlier. People lose their minds when a keeper is involved. It's as if all physics and rules and everything just goes straight out the window. You can do whatever you want when you're a keeper.
So I think overall, what we're saying, Willie, is, okay, you came out and said, look, we've made a balls up here, right? But then what happened after it was several major balls ups. So if we could really calm those down, and then you maybe won't have to come out quite so much. But I'm not too hot on it. Listen, I had to get that out of my system. We're trying to speak less about referees on this
but they were
this season's
week.
Podcast, and they were
topical
out this week.
Yeah.
Champions League is topical as well. The draw came out and we were all pretty excited about it. The teams, the home and away draws were made, and we've all got our Champions League package, and we've got our tickets, and we're on the verge of it. And I must admit, I'm looking at some of these ties, and I'm going, 2, 1. It's not exactly box office. Some of the some of the teams, it's a conference. Some of the teams are straight out of the conference, straight out of the Europa League. But Stephen, 2, that means some of these ties, as we've been saying since the balls were drawn, were eminently winnable.
Yeah, I think so. I think if Celtic have any ambitions of being a proper Champions League team, then you have to look at those games and think, right, we're not here to make up the numbers as we usually are. We need to be thinking about a reasonable points haul here, and it starts this week with Slovan Bratislava. I don't want to be cocky, I don't want to be complacent about it, certainly not, because we know what can happen in the Champions League. We've seen it so many times over the years. But it is one of those cliches where we don't beat Slovan Bratislava at home, don't deserve to be there, quite frankly. We need to be looking at that as a real opportunity to take 3 points, because after this game, just the way the fixtures have fallen,
it's tough, isn't it?
It's 3 very, very hard games in a row. I think it's Borussia Dortmund, Atalanta and Leipzig, all 3 in a row after this. So that's, you could be going quite a wee while without really major points there. Might get something here and there. That's the whole point of it, but we absolutely have to be winning. I'm not going to do that thing where you say, we need to win all your home games, because that's very difficult as well. There's no easy games here, but we need to be taking points against Slovan Bratislava.
Especially in the opening game, Melly. Celtic, we all know about the European nights at Celtic Park, and the amount of times Jerry McCulloch bangs on about it, he's making it a bit of a cliche, but they are special, and especially those opening nights, those first Champions League fixtures, there'll be players there. When that music hits, then they know they're at a big club. They know they're playing proper football in the proper Champions League, and the wee ball things out. Everyone's wiggling it, and the music starts to go. And you're like, right, okay. And the noise for the stadium, you just want to get out there and absolutely batter Bratislava, because the crowd is a real advantage. I know it's a bit cliche to say it, but Brendan Rodgers spoke about it loads on Inside the Huddle. It's just like the crowd. The energy given by the crowd is what spurs the players on, which feeds the players on the ground, and you just don't feel that electricity anywhere else apart from Celtic Park on Champions League nights.
No, you don't. So why I've always adamant that Scotland's not enough for Celtic to be dominating. We need to go into Europe and do that. I was raised on stories from my dad about European nights at Celtic Park, and like, yes, you'll have the beatings of Rangers, but every other great memory I have of Celtic is European nights and going into those games and getting results when believe, but it shouldn't be possible. And I think with this one, it's the same. When you think back to the Man City game, and when you can, there's a video on Twitter that's just the noise when that is going on. You can barely hear the Champions League music. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. I love it. It's what it's all about. And I think going into this game, it's the first time in a while that Celtic are going up against a team sort of below their level in the Champions League. Before, we've in the last couple of campaigns, we've been pot 4 seeds, and you're playing teams like Shakhtar, and you're going, they're a Champions League team. They're always there. They're a good team, but maybe we can try and beat them, and it hasn't worked out like that. But with this team, it's a team that they're the sort of minnows of the Champions League. They've barely qualified for it. They're in there, so they deserve to be there, but give Celtic a chance to win their first Champions League opener. I don't think we've ever won the opening game in the Champions League, so it's a big opportunity for Celtic. We're going into it in perfect conditions. There's no injuries. We're on good form. We've not conceded a goal. Everything's set for a great night at Celtic Park. It's not going to be easy. We're going to need to fight for everything. We're going to need to play well. Probably going to need to adapt a wee thing. I don't think we can sort of go as maybe gung-ho is maybe the wrong word, but we might need to just be a bit more structured. But we're in a great place, and even if things aren't going the way we want them to, at least we've now got options on the bench.
Well, that's it, Stephen. I think what makes me feel a lot better about the Champions League is I feel the squad's in a lot better place, especially in the summer. We shuffled that deck and we got rid of. I saw Dave Kerr, just reminded me. I saw Dave King. And it
You talk about pack of
I
cards.
thought about a deck. One league win and they'll fold like a deck of cards. Doesn't make sense, but they're choking to bring him.
Checkmate.
I know. Hit him in the bullseye. Checkmate. Aye, bring that guy back. Please bring him back. Where was it? Yeah, the state of the squad, we've shuffled it about a bit, and you like Melly said, you feel like, right, okay, this is a more tight knit, manageable, good quality Champions League squad. And I know Celtic versus the Slovak champions might not be a Hollywood tie, but you take that tie and you make it the opening Champions League fixture at Celtic Park, and all of a sudden it takes on a whole new dimension.
Yeah, and look, this stuff about how some of the teams are of so-called weaker, caliber, really, compared to some of the teams who've played in the past. It doesn't matter. This is the format that UEFA and everyone has decided is the right one to go forward. So it's not our place to say, that team's not a Champions League team. They quite literally are.
To be honest, some of the crap that's beaten us in the last 10 years, we really need to be careful.
Absolutely no position to be talking like this. Yeah, I know.
Ferenc Varos and who was it? Cluj and who else?
Cluj,
Malmo. Who did Neil Lennon get beat 8-2 by?
Sparta Prague.
Sparta Prague. So we really need to be careful.
Yeah, Kamze. But I know what you mean. Like, they're not necessarily. When you look at the home package, it's Leipzig are they're an established Champions League team.
Just not
now,
fashionable.
Yeah, they're not fashionable or historic. Really, they're more kind of new money. RB Leipzig, but I mean, I'm looking forward to all these games because I think for a change, Celtic can actually achieve something in it. I think we can actually put together a decent points haul if Celtic are serious about being a Champions League team. I think we have to target some wins in this. I know it's not a group, but you know what I mean, like this set of fixtures. So I'm happy, as you said, that the squad's in a much better place. We've given ourselves the opportunity to actually do something rather than coming at it after a window where we're bitterly disappointed to quote a great man. But you know what I mean? We've come into Champions League early stages before and thought, we've not got a chance here. We've done absolutely nothing in that transfer window. One of our best players is injured because that's happened the last few years as well. McGregor's been injured. Cameron Carter-Vickers has been injured. That isn't the case just now, thankfully. But the preparation has been good for this. Very good form.
Vickers that missed. He didn't miss last season. Who missed last season's whole Champions League?
Carter-Vickers did miss it.
Yeah,
he missed it.
Starfelt missed it all.
Starfelt missed it all, that's right.
And then there was a season where McGregor missed basically all of, or a lot of the group stage as well. Matt O'Reilly played.
That's been like a recurring theme for us, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's you're going into it already regretting sort of what you've done to prepare for this group. We've said it so many times. We're acting like a Champions League club and we've done nothing about it. We've just turned up. We've been invited to the door.
That was a huge thing that annoyed me last year. But
I don't think this is the case now. I think that on paper at least, Celtic have done very well in the squad management and the getting players out and bringing some very, on paper at least, because a lot of them are brand new, but some genuine quality into the squad. So I'm happy about that. There seems to be a bit of versatility there. What I said about Bernardo and Engels is that they seem equipped for this level. They've both played at very high levels before, and now they're here at Celtic. So hopefully that translates onto the pitch, because you're right, the fans have and will continue to do their part in it. We create that atmosphere. And I remember that it was Real Madrid, and I remember the camera was panning across their team when that thing kicked in, where the fans started cheering the Champions League theme. I think it was Militao or something like that. Now, bear in mind, this is Real Madrid, no strangers to the Champions League. They've heard that theme before, believe it or not. But one of them, I think it might have been Militao, I can't really remember specifically. One of them like visibly reacted to it. I kind of like, never seen anything like that before in my life, sort of thing. But so the fans have always done their part. It looks like the club have finally, at least on paper, addressed that. Try to kind of meet us where we are in terms of our Champions League ambitions. So I'm happy with that. No squad's ever perfect. It's always evolving. There will be work to be done in the next window. But this famous last words and all that, but we actually look, for Celtic, we look prepared to go into the Champions League this year.
Join us on Patreon for full Champions League coverage, scouting of all the opponents, post-match podcasts, pre-match videos, writing, everything that you could ever want for Celtic. Patreon.com/20minutetims. And we'll see you next week.